Christian parenting.
Is modesty a lost virtue in our world today? Join us for this important conversation on Family Vision.
Hi, my name is Millie Reno. Welcome to Family Vision with my parents, Dr. Rob and Amy Reno, strengthening families through practical, encouraging, and real conversations.
Hello, Rob Reno here with Visionary Family Ministries with my beautiful wife, Amy.
Hello.
Today, we're going to talk about modesty. Not a very common word or common concept in our culture today. Thanks to one of our listeners down in Florida, Ashley, who emailed us, thanked us for how the podcast has been an encouragement for her family, and she asked us to talk about this. So we thought that was a great idea. And before we jump in, just want to encourage you to go pick up a new resource from our ministry partners at Christian Parenting. They have got a new ebook out for parents and families. Really simple title, powerful teaching. It's called Love God, Love Others. Love God, love others. Comes from the scriptures that the first and the greatest commandment is to love God, and the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And Christian Parenting is giving away a copy of this free resource for anyone who donates to their ministry. And you can connect with Christian Parenting at cpgive.org, cpgive.org, and request this copy of this new resource, Love God, Love Others. Okay, honey, this Christian principle of modesty is for both men and women. But I think from a parenting standpoint, the challenges with our daughters may be greater than the challenges with our sons. We are talking about this here at the beginning of January, talking with producer Biff about this show before it aired, and he asked a good question. He said, does -4 degrees, which is what I think it is here today, does that help with the modesty issue? And your response quickly was what?
Absolutely not.
No, it does not. I say to my daughter, honey, do you need a coat? She's like, no, coats are for chumps. I'm like, what? Okay, great. All right, but listen, honey, what was your experience like in high school? Because actually, we're going to talk about modesty not just from a parenting standpoint, but we're going to address it from an adult standpoint as well, so our stories kind of factor into that. So you were in high school a few years ago, very recently, but your story kind of relates to where we're going to be going.
Yeah, I think it's important for as women to kind of understand this issue, and I wanted to give my own testimony on this issue as a foundation, even before we talk about it in parenting. So Ashley, I appreciate your email where you're opening a can of worms that is not going to be solved in just one episode. So we are actually really looking forward to talking about this. But let me just say, back in the 80s, I was sort of blessed with a kind of a weird high school culture that really modesty was the norm, in the sense that back when I went to high school, if your bra strap was showing, that was a bad thing. You would be embarrassed by that. So I naturally was very blessed with a culture like the popular girls. This
was public school, too.
Public school. What the cool kids were doing was still modest. And then I think I was maybe a junior or senior before I stepped into like wearing a two-piece bikini or things like that. And that was kind of socially acceptable. But even that was, they were in the range of bikinis. They were much more modest than some of them we see today. But moving forward, I went on to a secular state college. And even there, I joined a dance team. It was called the Linettes. And it was really just, this is amazing kind of part of my story, that I happened to be on this dance team only the 2 years ever where the girls we wore complete one-piece suits, one-piece outfits, not like these really nothing Dallas Cowboy, nothing like that at all. So again, I was blessed that it was more modest. It fit with my level of comfort, but it also didn't force an issue for me as of yet, because I wasn't in a situation where I had to wear something that really made me feel uncomfortable, especially in that environment when you're dancing in front of, thousands and thousands of people. That was a blessing. And so I gave this foundation because I think it's really important to understand where culture is at with these things versus where we are at, because whatever the culture is doing has a huge impact on the way you think about it as a mom and how you think about it for your kids. So let's just be aware of that.
Right. So you're soaking, whatever you're soaking in when you grew up, kind of wires you for how you think about this. And then whatever's happening in the culture around you kind of sets the table for this is just normal and acceptable.
Well, yes, and I guess giving my history, what is important to understand is I didn't have to face a culture that was telling me one thing and I was going to stand out doing it very differently. I was blessed to have more, in general, much more modesty all around me. But then what was really interesting, when I married a youth pastor, which was something I never expected to do, be a pastor's wife, and actually a pastor's wife even in the town I grew up in, So what was interesting is that it changed me a little bit in this sense, that I became more others focused in the sense that it did make me think about what I was wearing, very specifically in the bathing suit department. Because even though I wore bikinis all the time through college, I had no conviction that was wrong. I mean, I never would have thought that. I thought it was totally acceptable. There was a part of me that just was like, okay, so now I'm going to be wearing a bikini at the local pool and I'm going to see these high school boys that are in my youth group. How am I going to feel about that? That made me uncomfortable. I made a decision there to change the way. That's the first time ever.
Because that's a new dynamic.
Yeah, it's a new dynamic. And it's the first time ever that the Lord was kind of planting this thought that I need to think about what I'm wearing because of how it affects someone else. And up to that point in my life, I never had that thought, ever. But that sort of challenged me to start thinking about it from a very new perspective. And then I was also a leader of teenage girls. And that made me realize, too, okay, so and we did that for 10 years, and I was in that environment. I can still remember the story where, we had rules back then where the girls in our youth group had to wear one-piece suits when we went on youth group trips, right? I won't say the school that we went with, but we went on a spring break trip, and we partnered with another youth group. Do you remember this? And the girls that were from that youth group were just furious that they had this rule. So they kept breaking the rule, and they would get away from us on the beach and have their two pieces on. And that was the first time that experience, because the girls in our youth group, I think, had general respect for our rules and didn't really fight back on that. But I remember being so amazed on this trip that how important it was for these girls to wear what they wanted to wear, to not be told that they couldn't wear that, and they were willing to go to great lengths to do what they wanted to do. Yeah. And that was a shift in culture. That's when I started to see how different culture was changing in these issues of modesty.
That's a great story, because our kids right now are having to navigate modesty, not just out there in a culture, but at their Christian school. If they're in a Christian school, if they go to a youth group. And maybe the environment that's more intense than any other is the social media world, what they see there and also what they post there. We're navigating with a lot of families with girls who will wear a certain thing outside of the house, but then they'll take pictures inside of the house with far less on. And to reiterate, this is a needed conversation in our Christian circles. Our conversation here is not really the laundry list of how raunchy Hollywood is, and it is, because it's just a lot closer to home. I saw a cartoon the other day. It was two Christian high school girls. One girl was holding up like a tiny mini tank. I don't know the girl terms here. It's like the top of a two-piece bathing suit. I don't know. And on front of this little thing was WWJD, which what would Jesus do? And the caption said, look at my awesome new witness wear.
Right. Now, let me just say, we could laugh at that, but the reality is that's not so far off from reality, from the current culture.
All humor has a grain of truth.
Yes, it's a big grain of truth in that one. So I want to just point out again, just as a note of compassion that parents need to have, and empathy that parents need to have, is what your kids are seeing as normal is kind of sometimes extreme, like things that I would never think of approaching my parents to wear out of the house. But we're seeing this in a lot of Christian cultures. So your kids are facing a world where this is much more in their face and much more socially acceptable.
Yeah, and not to underestimate. So you're going to try to cast a vision and set some guidelines for your daughter to dress more modestly. I mean, you're calling her, encouraging her, challenging her, requiring her to be really different and to not underestimate,
Yes.
like you say, coming with compassion, how difficult that is
Absolutely.
for a girl or a boy. One of the scriptures that gives a great foundation for this whole conversation is from 1 Peter chapter 3. It's from the New Living Translation. And the particular passage here speaks to women, but again, the principle of modesty is for everyone. It says, "Don't be concerned about the outward beauty of fancy hairstyles, expensive jewelry, or beautiful clothes. You should clothe yourselves instead with the beauty that comes from within, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is so precious to God. This is how the holy women of old made themselves beautiful." So there's a lot to unpack there, but there's nothing wrong with wanting to be attractive or for other, you want other people to be drawn to us or to like us. The issue is, like, what are we drawing people's attention to? And in future episodes, we're really going to dig in on that. But I want to go back to your story because there's some huge learnings and perspective changes that you
Yes.
went through, and in some ways we have to navigate some of these issues personally as parents before we think about talking to our kids.
Yes, and I think that's very, very important. So just continuing in my story, when I started to change some of my habits and how I dressed, not necessarily because I was personally convicted that what I was wearing was immodest, because that really wasn't the motivation. The motivation was the first time, okay, here I am, a youth pastor's wife. Maybe I need to think more about how I'm dressing and how it might affect others. That was the motivation. But while I was a youth pastor's wife, I also was working on my degree and starting my career as a marriage family therapist. And very interestingly, one of the very first jobs I had was running a support group for women who were married to men who were dealing with sexual addiction. So this is kind of baptism by fire in the sense that I am now doing this weekly, and I'm working with these women. But it's teaching me and showing me, like, my mind is kind of getting blown on a weekly basis in regards to these women's attitudes about modesty in our culture. Now, it's hard to imagine a world before Victoria's Secret, but let me try to, for those of you who are my age, you'll know that there was a world before Victoria's Secret. It used to be that you could go into stores, that you could go in public, and you wouldn't be bombarded with women in their underwear. Like, that was not normal. That really wasn't. And it really was the introduction of Victoria's Secret that really changed this in our culture. I think this quote was attributed to C.S. Lewis. I do not 100% sure that it is him. But he had said back in, C.S. Lewis time, that we had lost the right to not view pornography. And when I heard these women's stories and them talk about how much they hated the Victoria's Secret catalog coming to their house, how they would rip it up and throw it away, and that they, how, they were dealing with the results of the pornographic culture that we live in. And that is when my eyes were open to the fact that, first of all, I became personally convicted about it because I just didn't want to contribute to it. Like, I want to do my best to not add to the problem, and understand that we would like, I listen to women and even myself, we want men to behave a certain way. We want them to have these certain ideals. We want them to, take their faith seriously. We want them to be committed to us and to be faithful to us. And yet it seems like culture tells us we should be able to wear and act and dress any way we want, and that shouldn't affect that. Like, these are two completely separate issues. Well, the world I had of leading that group for about 3 years really challenged that and changed the way that I thought. In fact, I was so personally convicted, I have never stepped into Victoria's Secret since then. I will not shop at that store. And my kids laugh at me, the amount of stores that go on the list. Then it became Abercrombie and Fitch because they were what they were showing in their store. I actually have a really funny story about that because one time we were shopping for a present for you at the mall, And the way this mall is set up, it's like an outer mall, and you couldn't get into the store. We wanted to get in and out to this store. And I've got all 4 kids with me, and it's January. No, it's not January. It's Christmas present. December. It's freezing. And my only way to get to the store that I want to get to is I have to go through Abercrombie and Fitch.
And I'd
already told the kids that, they already knew all my positions. Like we didn't shop at those places. We don't look in those windows, everything. And so I'm loading 2 kids. I have 4 kids. They're all connected to the stroller. Like 3 of them are all somehow attaching themselves to the stroller. My oldest is right next to me. And all the stroller, I'm telling, close your eyes, kids, close your eyes. We're going through a very evil store. We're going through a very evil store. And they're all like, their eyes are looking at me like, oh, how evil. You know what I mean? Might have been a little overdramatic. I agree, but that's kind of, I specialize in that sometimes. And then my oldest, RW, is helping me push the stroller, and he's kind of got his eyes like this. And, as soon as you even open the doors, the cologne smell is just,
right.
If you've ever been to that store, it's unbelievable. The cologne is, and we're just getting through there like, don't look, and all this stuff. We get to the outside, and we get through it. RW looks at me, he goes, that was a very evil store. But I mean, that's how I grew to, such a sense of wanting to communicate. If you don't say things like that, if you don't address the culture, you are actually normalizing it.
Right. Well, you use the word evil, and you kind of laughed. You say you might be overstating it.
Yeah.
But, folks, I don't know if you all remember this or not, but in the Abercrombie and Fitch magazines that were coming out, they'd have a boy and 2 girls naked in a bed together in their magazines, and articles about threesomes and all this kind of stuff.
Yes,
so
it was evil.
You might not like using the word evil, but that's evil. Mm-hmm. It's evil in the sense that it's promoting sexual destruction for children. So there is a level here of modesty that we're just talking about wisdom and treating our bodies as holy and set apart, and talking about what you were saying about offending other people. But there's a level here, too, that gets into, you have to understand that Satan and the demons want to, immodesty is just a tip of an iceberg for a lot of other evil things that Satan and the world want to do.
And I want to add to that you're right, that's exactly the core issue. And I want to add to that when I go back to my stores, there was another store, Justice, that I would not shop at for my girls. In fact, all these stores are actually connected, but they were selling thongs to little girls. That's evil.
Amen.
That is evil. And we have to call a spade, and I'd like parents to wake up to what's going on out there. And I remember listening, well, why can't I go to that store? And I'm convicted as your mom that, they sell these type of underwear for little girls. I believe that is wrong, and I do not want you to have any part of it, and we're not going to do that. We don't need to make comments about what other people's choices are. But I just want to reiterate that point again. Like, if you don't say anything, you are desensitizing and acting like that is normal. So one of the starting points for me when I became so convicted on these issues, and I had young kids, was just simply when we walked by a Victoria's Secret at the mall, I would say, that is not appropriate. Women should not be dressed in their underwear flat, showing that to the whole world. So we're not only not going to look at it, but it's not just ignoring it. It's addressing it and saying that's wrong.
All right, I think you just said something really important, because we're all walking through stores like this.
Correct.
We all see these commercials in the Super Bowl or whatever else is on TV. So what you just said, I think it's so important. You said if we don't speak to this and to actively tell our kids, this is not like normal, appropriate, healthy, you're actually teaching them it is normal, appropriate,
Correct.
Healthy with your silence.
Correct. And that was a huge turning point for me, because I was just not addressing it, maybe avoiding certain things, but I was never communicating my convictions about it to my kids. And that changed.
And I think one real practical thing for dads, and this is something that the Lord has helped me with, and I've been really thankful to see my boys catch it as well. And this is particularly when we're watching sports on TV, because you have the commercials that come up or the halftime shows or whatever that frequently are inappropriate. That's my cue to just either look away from the TV, get up, go get a drink,
Correct.
but just to move my eyes away, and not only by, you talk to your boys about it. Look, when that stuff comes on, you bounce your eyes off of it, but to see them start to catch that, I'm already seeing with Ray, our 12-year-old, we'll be watching, something will come on, I'll see him look away. I'm super proud of him for that.
And let me conclude this section with just saying my own story here is that after going through all of these things, that's when I became personally convicted about specifically my own swimwear choices. Up to this point, I would never have said for me there was anything wrong with wearing a bikini, but I chose not to do that anymore because I just didn't want to contribute to it anymore. I became personally convicted. Now, I'm not saying that all women have this conviction. In fact, there are many. What started out with me making bathing suit choices at the Wheaton Public Pool because I was thinking about, okay, how does this affect me as a youth pastor's wife? Within the span of 10 years, I had changed my habits and I was wearing more modest tankinis, if you will. And there were many elders' wives coming to the pool in their bikinis. So obviously moving in different directions, not having those convictions. And I'm just saying it's not easy. It's not easy to operate so counterculturally. And that's just a little thing. It's a little thing in many ways, but it's a way that I know I personally am convicted on how I dress for the beach or the pool.
Right. Well, one thing you said earlier that I think was wrong. You said that you didn't think we were going to solve all this in one episode, and I think we did. I think we solved this whole thing.
What do you?
That's a joke. But no, we're planning at least one more part on this. And as always, we'd love to hear from you with thoughts, questions, testimonies, how Family Vision's making a difference in your life. You can always reach us at podcast@visionaryfam.com. That's podcast@visionaryfam.com. Also, we've got a new book out from Visionary Family Ministries. It is a family worship guide through the books of Exodus to Deuteronomy. Super fun, doable, stuff for all ages. You can find it on Amazon or on our website, visionaryfam.com. Just search Family Worship Exodus and it will pop up.
Well, I just want to add that when we talk about this again, we are hoping to have our high school daughter with us because this is only the beginning of the tide. Because when we talk about how to deal with this in our home and how to handle these issues with our kids, that's when it gets really spicy, I think.
Absolutely. Spicy is a good word. We appreciate you spending this time with us, and we're excited about our time together next on Family Vision.